Operating Officer of Heroic Hearts Project Australia. With a background in national security, Holly previously served as a member of the intelligence community. Her personal challenges, including bouts of depression, suicidal ideation, and since 2017, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, have shaped her journey. And I don't want to talk too much about it. I want Holly to talk about her journey because there is so much I want to ask. Hello, Holly. How are you?
Hello, I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing with us your journey, your learnings, and your work as well. We were talking just like for 2 minutes before we came live that the advancements of conventional therapy when it comes to mental health in the last, I would say, 20 to 30 years hasn't been really what we need, I think, as a society. And I think this is really an exciting space for you to be working on. But just tell us, like, how, what was your journey like, to get to where you are today?
Yeah. Well, thank you for connecting in. I really appreciate the invite too. It's really lovely to connect in. Yeah, so my background's in the law enforcement space. I've spent overall 6 years working in the field of law enforcement. I've dedicated 2.5 of those years to the intelligence community, working with quite confronting materials at times. I came out of that role with a diagnosis of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I started to spiral down further and further, and my PTSD really overtook me. I was having nightmares every night. I was terrified to go to sleep. I was extremely suicidal, very depressed. I was having flashbacks in public. It was just sort of the typical PTSD symptomology that I was going through. And I mean, I tried all the conventional medications. I tried the psychiatric meds. I even got put on antipsychotics at one stage. I tried all of the talk therapies, the trauma therapies, CBT, DBT, EMDR therapy, all of the ones that are. I even tried exposure therapy, which is supposed to be our sort of gold standard for treatment for PTSD at the moment. Unfortunately, that was not helpful for me. It was actually rather traumatizing to go through the exposure therapy route. So yeah, I really struggled, and come 2018, I gave up, and I just couldn't see a way forward anymore. So I attempted suicide in 2018, and I mean, luckily I had been doing some research about overseas trauma therapy options a
Mhm.
couple of months before I tried to end my life, and I'm very, very lucky with the timing of that. I was lying in the hospital after my suicide attempt, just thinking, like, I've got one last chance here, and that's to go to Peru, and that's to try ayahuasca. Because
Yeah.
I had been doing this research, and I was seeing a lot of US Marines in particular were heading down to Peru to access ayahuasca therapy in the traditional setting. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I hadn't considered it too much. I felt it was pretty extreme and maybe rather confronting, and
Yeah.
I felt a bit worried about the whole process. But I mean, 2 months later, I was on a plane on my own to Peru, just progressively
Wow.
smaller airplanes into the jungle,
Yeah.
and
I've
I
been to
mean,
the Amazon forest in Peru. It's like, yeah, there is nothing there.
yeah, yeah, the runways in the jungle are just a dirt strip, so yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite a journey to get there. But I mean, I arrived there quite broken. I cried on the plane from Sydney to Chile the whole way. I was just in an absolute wreck, and when I got there, I just immediately felt support and love and comfort, and the space being held for me. So I had an absolutely transformational time in 2018 on my first trip to Peru. I was able to relive some of my traumas from an objective perspective, so I was able to finally process some of them. I came back and I wasn't having nightmares like crazy anymore. My suicidality had pretty much disappeared entirely. I
Wow.
discovered this self love and this self connection that in my whole life I've never experienced before. So, I mean,
Wow.
I sort of view my life now as sort of better than I've ever been in my whole life, even before working in law enforcement. I had some struggles with my mental health before that, and I've just never felt better than I have now about myself and my direction and my connections with my family and friends, and everything's just improved astronomically since 2018, since I first accessed ayahuasca.
Wow. I've got so many questions here, like that it comes up. Like, one is you kind of touched on, like you had some mental health struggles before you joined law enforcement. I mean, how, what was that like? Like, was that just kind of, like it just, was not nothing like diagnosed, or was it something that was, you really suffered for years before you joined, or?
No, I mean, I've had a later in life diagnosis of ASD, so I've been formally diagnosed with a level 1 autism, and I mean, I'm not sure how much that affected me. You know, looking back, hindsight's an interesting thing when you get a late diagnosis of autism. It's
Yeah.
you look back and it's sort of like so many parts of your life make sense, and so many times where, when I was a kid and I'd get in trouble for doing something that I thought I was doing right, and I just couldn't understand that. There was a lot of moments like that, a lot of sort of potential relationship breakdowns too on my behalf in the past too, not understanding where the line has been. I've definitely suffered from depression since I was in 13, 14. I got put on antidepressants for the first time when I was 14, and after about 6 months, I was an absolute zombie, and I just had to get off them. They were not helping. I would come home from school every day and get into bed and just stare at the wall for hours, So, I mean, my first experiences with antidepressants and SSRIs in general were not the greatest, but there is a place for them. I don't believe that we can shun them fully. It's
Yeah.
they've helped a lot of people, and they continue to help a lot of people. So, yeah, I mean, they just weren't particularly helpful for me. So, yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because I'm with you on that. I think that we can't shut one thing and just go to, I think there's a lot of, in the cancer world, we have that as well. No, just people go like, no, you can't do chemo, you just have to go through natural. And and I think that what we need is like sometimes it's a combination of both, it needs to be a customized approach, right? And I think that it's very brave of you at 14 to realize, like, this is not working for me, because sometimes it could be the case that a 14-year-old kid doesn't realize that that's not working for them, and that takes them down a road that it's even worse than they were before. And I think that's where we can potentially get ourselves like in situations where we don't want to be in. But of course, and I can imagine, like, when you talk about that, like, the psychedelics, it's probably not even allowed for people that are younger than 18. I'm not sure how this.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in the Western world, that is. I mean,
In the Western world, yeah.
The maestros and stuff in Peru, they drink at age 8 sometimes. I know a maestro who started drinking the medicine at age 8 and continued his medicine journey through there, and has a wealth of knowledge and experience now. He's been working with the medicines for 29 years now, and he's one of the most amazing maestros I've ever met. But here, if we were to give a child any form of psychedelic at the age of 8, that would be probably deemed child abuse. So yeah,
exactly.
Very different worlds.
And then another question that I had is that you mentioned, of course, the choice of your work was it was a very stressful, right? Like, so you compound that with like what you already had, kind of the history. And to be honest, I think there's so many people that are in this place, so many people that are working as health professionals, doctors, nurses, people working with, child abuse survivors, and, and perhaps they're suffering from those symptoms, and, they're trying to push through it. What would you say to a person who is trying to kind of, they know something is probably not right, but they, perhaps are not even sure, where to start or how to get out of that place,
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I'll always say reach out to someone, reach out to anyone. Someone you trust is obviously one of the best ways that you can go about it. But I mean, reaching out for professional help, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I couldn't even count the amount of psychologists I've had in the past 20 years of my life. You know, they've all taught me different things here and there, and it's been a great overall perspective. But I mean, connecting with people that you feel comfortable with, firstly, destigmatizing that conversation too. It's I mean, especially when you're working in a space in like law enforcement or the military, where if you are experiencing these things, that if you were to go to your work psychologist or even to your boss to speak about this, you're risking your job. You know, you could be deemed mentally unfit for your position anymore, and lose your position that way. So a lot of people tend to not speak up based on that, which is, it's absolutely awful. It's an awful culture to think that we've created this space where the people who need, you know, support the most don't feel comfortable speaking out when they are struggling. And I mean, that's a massive issue. How to deal with that, I don't know. But it's about normalizing the conversation and creating a safe space where, especially people in the military who would be deemed mentally unfit for their job anymore and probably be, you know, honorably discharged. And it's about finding a way of balancing that. You know, we don't need to fire people, and when you fire someone, or if someone's deemed mentally unfit for their position anymore, especially in the military, but also in law enforcement, there's this sense of identity that, you know, you become your job. And I mean, I see the dangers of associating too closely your job and your identity now. But I had to learn that the hard way. But I mean, a lot of people go through this where they come out of their job and they've lost the brother or the sisterhood, the community of it. They feel very disconnected from all their family in their positions. And they really, I mean, I really struggled with, like, who am I now? I dedicated my life to that space. I studied at uni. I did a Bachelor of Politics and International Relations, and I majored in national security. So my focus was counterterrorism mainly. And I did that for years and started working in the space. And, you know, after however many years, it's like, when you're not in that space anymore, it's like, what am I doing now? Who am I? I don't know what my direction is now. I don't have a calling anymore. You know, I felt so passionate about what I was doing. And I mean, I don't feel that way so much anymore, because I've been through a long process of sitting with medicines and healing and trying to dish out the little things like associating your identity with your job, because when that gets taken away, it's traumatic in itself, having this identity crisis in the midst of this suicidality and PTSD world that you're in. It's just adds and compounds trauma to make so much worse. So it can be a really tough one.
So by the time that happened, you had already left your job, right? Like when you went to Peru, you had already kind of
So I left my job in 2017, and I was in Peru in November of 2018. So I tried all the therapies and the medications and stuff in that time, and I just sunk further and further into a spiral of hell, really. It was awful.
And how did you move from that place, you know, coming back and feeling healed and feeling that, you know, more, you know, all the self-love that you talk about, which is so beautiful, like, how did you kind of reconstruct your life again, right? I think that's
it's funny. I talk about my life in terms of like pre-Peru and post-Peru now, because they are just so opposite ends of the spectrum of what I valued, what I felt was truly important, what my outlook on life, my mindset, everything was completely different. So, I mean, it was a long process of integrating. I went through a big integration period coming back from my first trip to Peru. And, you know, the integration space is all about recognizing the insights that you've had through your psychedelic experience and being able to integrate them back into your daily life. Like, how are you going to take the learnings that you've had and apply them to your daily life when you come home? And I mean, it's hard enough coming home. Coming home from after being in the jungle for 3 weeks, living without a phone, living without electricity or hot water, you know, it's hard. It's really hard to come back into the Western world. And it's, if you do take the time with slowly integrating yourself back into the Western life, and as well as going through a deep integration process around your experience, it definitely helps. But I mean, I'm not going to pretend like it was easy. It was it was difficult. It was hard. I was very lucky. I had all the supports back in Peru still, so I was taken through an integration process with the integration guys in Peru. So I was very lucky there. Yeah, but I mean, it is about reconstructing your life, and when all your beliefs and values disintegrate in ceremony, and you then sort of realize or go through the process of like, what do I value now?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I think you froze there. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. She was gonna come back in 1 minute, but I just want to talk while Holly's coming back. That I felt the same with my cancer journey. That I was just saying, Holly, while you were off, like that, I felt the same with my cancer journey. It's like, okay, well, you can you hear me? Can you hear me? I can't hear you yet. No, I can't hear you yet for some reason. Hello? I still can't hear you. It looks like I have a good internet connection, and I do too, but I can't hear you. You can't hear me either? Oh, oh, okay. So we might have to get off, and do you want to try to come off and come back on again? So what I was saying is that with my cancer journey, I felt the same. Like when I was told, like you have cancer, it was like, okay, well, nothing that I thought was important is important anymore. Like, like I still can't hear you,
Yeah,
and
sorry, we're
oh, yeah,
back.
I can hear you now. Okay. And you have this like, okay, well, so who am I now? Like, what do I believe in? How do I go from here? And and it's kind of for me, because I had to self quarantine during chemo. I had to stay at home because I was getting coughs and colds all the time. I went into my own kind of, not ayahuasca, but like, journey. Like I feel like I also have this like pre-cancer life and post-cancer life, and I went into my cocoon, and I was like, okay, well, now what? Like I've got to literally rebuild myself, not only physically but mentally and emotionally as well.
Yeah.
And that includes your work life, that includes your relationships, that includes how you see the world, includes everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess I feel kind of lucky to have had this integration process along the way. I was able to really sit with myself and look at what I had experienced and what I learned. And I mean, a lot of that revolved around connection, and connection with my family. A lot of that to do with connection with family. And when I came back, it was like I was able to sit. Firstly, I was able to sit calmly with myself when I came back, and that's something that I've struggled a lot with in the past.
Mm,
To just be able to sit with my feelings without judging them, without attaching too much to them. I've been able to come home and sit with my feelings, that even if they are awful feelings, I can sit with them, but I don't have to feel them. I don't have to be them. I
yeah,
can I can feel them and I can go through that process, but I'll acknowledge them, and I'll approach them with love and curiosity instead of
yeah,
this judgment and self-shame space, which is what I used to go through with that.
yes,
So, I mean, coming back and being able to sit with my emotions and my feelings after feeling so out of control of my emotions and my actions and behaviors and everything in these depths of PTSD, where I'm being triggered out in public and I don't want to leave the house and I can't sleep and I don't want to
yeah,
live, and it's like that's all gone. And I feel very lucky that that's all gone. But it's a big contrast, it's a big difference to go from living in this fight or flight constantly to being able to sit calmly. sleep through the night. It's these little things
Wow.
that have changed where it's like I can finally breathe again, and I can then
Mm,
focus on these other things for my integration. Because I'm sleeping better, I can focus on this connection with my family better. I can, because I'm not judging myself constantly, I have space in my heart and in my life to connect deeply with my mum, who has a fast progressing form of Alzheimer's. So
yeah.
I'm able to care for her in a way that, I mean, had I not been to Peru, my ability to care for my mum, I know, would have been way worse. It would have just been, I wouldn't have that. I wouldn't have the patience that I have. I wouldn't
Yes.
have the ability to not take on so much of the awfulness that comes along with watching my mum decline. I'm able
Mhm.
to be with her, and I live now, my whole family lives on a big property now in different houses, so we're all here together
Oh,
caring for my
wow.
mum. Yeah, and I mean, it's
That's
pretty.
amazing. That is amazing. That's like, how many families can say that, right? Like,
Exactly. We've got my parents in one house, my mum and dad. We've got my sister, her husband, and their three
wow.
girls. And then we've got my partner and I. We're in a tiny home on the property too. So, I mean, there's no way I would have been able to do all of this had I
No.
not been through this healing process. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, again, I've got, so many things that you said. I lived through it, the getting your body out of that flight and fight and being able to breathe and sit with your feelings, whether they're good or bad. And I don't know if you felt like that, but I felt so disconnected from my body because I was in so much, pain, not physical pain, but emotional pain, that I had, I learned to disassociate from my feelings. And, during cancer treatment, when I started meditating, I will be sitting down going like, oh my god, like who is this person, like what is going on in here, and I would be doing a yoga session, and the teacher would be like, how does it feel in your body? And I'm like which body? Like this one?
Yeah.
Because you get used to it, right? And do you find that a lot of it as well is kind of having that ability to let go of the suffering? Because we do get attached to some of the suffering, right? Like
Yeah.
today, for me, I've got some stuff that also I had to work through with my family. I had a lot of anger and resentment, and a lot of my cancer was that.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
you get so attached to it, right? Like you get attached to the suffering, the anger, the resentment, whatever it is, the
Yeah.
stories, and you even embellish these stories even more, and and you can't see them objectively, right? How much was in the integration process, just going like, yeah, I'm not that person anymore, and I don't want to be holding on to this shit and this crap.
Yeah.
I want to be moving on. I want to be happy. I want to be, I want to feel peace.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was actually speaking to my mentor in Peru last night about sort of this topic, and I remember saying to her, like, in ceremony, in ayahuasca ceremony, there's a big part of your ceremony is purging. So
Mm,
you'll do a lot of vomiting, and I've always viewed that as a big energetic release. And
mhm.
when I go through that process of being sick and purging, I feel like I'm letting go of stuff that's not mine to carry anymore.
Yes.
And that's a big part of it, because I feel like a lot of my trauma has been vicarious. So it's been through witnessing things that have happened to other people. And
Mm,
that's, I hope it doesn't sound selfish, but that's not
no.
mine to carry. And when I've carried that for so long, and when I'm able to release that in a purge or a ceremony, or in whatever way it comes out, I realize that it wasn't mine to start with. And if I can get that out and process that as well, then I can integrate better. I can move on better. I can hold space for myself better. And I mean, a lot of these complexes come around from labels as well. I was deemed treatment resistant in 2018, and I mean, going to Peru and coming back, this is the only reason I know that I'm not treatment resistant. I'm just treatment resistant in the Western world and in the clinical model in the Western world. And that's been a big learning for me too, because had I just, I mean, there
Is that
was a
how they
period.
labeled you? They labeled you. Oh wow, what a
Yeah,
What an
yes.
empowering label.
Yeah. So I mean, being able to drop that treatment resistant label, and like when you get that treatment resistant diagnosis, it's like it kind of feels like, well, cool, that's the end. I guess I'm gonna give up then because I'm treatment resistant. And like those two words are really powerful for people going through really intense trauma. It's quite an awful diagnosis to get.
Yeah.
And I mean, I understand the need for it to be accessing
Yes.
treatments on different levels or getting into clinical trials, whatever it might be. It's a really hard one to get that, because it really does put you in a space of, well, cool, I'm treatment resistant, nothing's going to help. I guess I'll just live
Yeah.
like this or just die like this,
Yeah,
however
it's
it goes.
the language that conventional medicine uses sometimes is very disempowering. And I learned this, as I went through my treatment, like first session, oh, you're going to feel really bad and really nauseous, not going to be able to do anything, and you're going to be really tired. I remember like getting out of my oncologist's office saying like, I'm not going to be that person. Nah, this is not going to be me. But it takes so much courage because, of course, and I'm not discounting, their knowledge and their experience, but he hasn't gone through what I have gone through,
Yeah.
he can do the calculations of the dosage of the chemo. But, when you say that, you just already set a scene of like, you're going to spend 7.5 months in the sofa, like, not being able to do anything. And I wasn't that person. So it takes, I think the language, the conventional medicine needs to work on how they talk to people, and it needs to be an empowering. And I think also patients need to take the responsibility like you did.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think taking responsibility is a big part of healing. I mean, I had the biggest victim mentality before I went to Peru. It was these questions where, why has this happened to me? How has this happened to me? Like, why me, 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 me? It sounds so selfish in hindsight to think that I was even questioning it like that. But I mean, I was in that, that's all I could do at the time. I'm not going to look back on those moments and try and shame myself on those. I was doing the best I could with what I had at the time. But it's a big part of it. When I came back from my first trip to Peru, I had this sense of ownership
Yes.
of my healing. It was like, no one's coming to save me here.
Yeah.
But more than that, I don't need to look at it like, how or why did this happen to me? Why
Yeah.
can't I do the things I used to be able to do? It's like, there's a big acceptance space there of, this is where you are right now, and that's okay. It's okay to be where you are, and it's okay to feel raw coming out of a big healing experience like with ayahuasca. And I mean, I'm not going to claim to be healed. I'm in no way healed. It's no, I don't believe anyone's healed. It's a
Mhm.
continuous journey. So, I mean, I feel a lot better than I ever have. So I know that I've healed certain parts of my life, but it's definitely ongoing. It will always be an ongoing thing. I still have nightmares every now and then. I still have some triggers that, I get triggered by, but overall, I've been able to engage in therapy. When I came back, I was able to step back into talk therapy, and it actually do something for me. Like,
Yeah.
it's like I just needed to break through this horrendous mindset I was in and just
Yeah.
process some shit and just sort of move through it a bit, to the point where talk therapy then was helpful. I was able to, I mean, my mindset around that changed too, though. Like before I went to Peru,
Yes.
I found myself even lying to my psychologist just about stupid little things. And I, like, afterwards, I'd be like, well, you're wasting your own time doing this,
Yes.
like you're wasting both of your time
Yeah.
lying to your psychologist. It's like I'm trying to win therapy. It's like, I want
Yeah.
him to think that I'm better than I am. And it's like, that's the whole purpose of therapy, is to be honest and raw. And I mean, coming back from Peru, I was able to do that. So it was, every aspect of my life changed following my integration process.
Yeah, I think what you said there is so powerful in so many levels. Like I also had a victim mentality, right? Oh my God, I'm such hard done by, and this happened in my childhood, and why did that happen with my family? And what, and there is so many people living in that space. And like I said, like I'm not shaming and blaming people, that's okay for people to be in that space. But I think like to heal yourself, um, you need to empower yourself, because going to therapy thinking that a therapist is going to heal you, like the therapist is there as, of course, to give you tools and tactics and her experience and kind of directing you, but the work is done by you. And I think that's really where we get into this kind of issue around our health, mental, physical, everywhere in the world these days. And this is why people, like our health is getting so bad, like 70% of people are dealing with chronic diseases and, things, and mental health is huge now and it's not getting any better. But the thing is, like, no one is going to come to save you.
Yeah.
I mean, very early on, I got a couple of books from the library just about like women who had gone through chemo. I knew nothing about them. And they spent their whole book complaining about, why do I have cancer and this? And I was like, oh my God, this whole book? Are they ever going to get any better? And then I just thought, this is just crazy. I was like, this is why I wrote my own book, just get over that bit quickly and then you can get on with healing. We can't heal ourselves unless we empower ourselves. And sometimes, that does require us going against the grain, like, which is what you did. And I must admit, I mean, I would have been really scared to do what you did.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, but you did it anyway, right? You did it anyway.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I did it out of hitting rock bottom. There's no really other explanation for why I hopped on a plane and went to the Amazon rainforest on my own into the jungle to drink psychedelics with, amazing shamans. So I absolutely hit rock bottom, and I had to, I'm kind of glad I was able to see that I'd hit rock bottom, because it was like, we can only go up from here. But I mean, that was it was hard to even think that way at the time. Yeah, I mean, it was scary. It was scary on the way over. The thought of it was scary to me. What I might experience was scary to me. I didn't want to front load myself too much going into ceremony, but there were a few things that I was hoping, might not come up because I didn't feel I was ready to be addressing them or whatever it might be. But as anyone in this world will tell you, ayahuasca will show you what you need to be shown. Yeah. So and no more than you can handle. So I felt relatively comfortable going in, and I mean, the support of the facilitators and the maestros at the retreats, it's impossible to feel scared going into ceremony when they are just so amazing the way that they are. I mean, I was pretty terrified, but I felt very comfortable going into ceremony. I felt very supported throughout my whole journey there. Throughout all of my ceremonies, I felt extremely supported, and I mean, that's a big part of it, is feeling safe to be able to go deep and delve deep. Yeah.
So have you been back, or like, do you still do you have? Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Yes, I've been back. And I plan on, visiting regularly even more now with Heroic Hearts projects.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about it.
Sure, yes. Heroic Hearts project was initially set up in the US by Jesse Gould. He's a veteran, and he's focused for the past 5 years on getting vets to Peru to sit with ayahuasca. I mean, their focus has changed and morphed and gotten even more impressive since then, I guess. They're contributing to research now. They've got research teams in the jungle with them. They've just had their first ever legal veteran psilocybin retreat in America, which is a huge step forward for them and for America in general. So yeah, there's a UK branch as well and a Canadian branch too. We're all doing the same sort of thing. We're focusing here though with Heroic Hearts Project Australia on the veterans and first responders as well.
Yes.
Obviously our military is a lot smaller than America, but also my co-founder Michael Raymond, he's a 16-year veteran, so he covers sort of the vet side, and I attempt to cover the first responder side.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we're in the process of going through the charity status setup, which is a long one.
Yes.
But eventually it will be taking vets and first responders on retreat to Peru to sit with ayahuasca and possibly San Pedro too, a beautiful cactus medicine.
Yes.
We're also sort of towing this weird space here where obviously we've had the rescheduling happen here in Australia. We've got clinical trials going on constantly.
Yeah. I was going to ask, like, what is the status like in Australia right now to utilize, those psychedelics?
So right now, accessibility is the biggest issue. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any psychiatrist being approved yet to be working with the medicines. It's not to say that they won't be. It's a quite a long-winded process to get approval with different permits and going through the special access scheme with the TGA and it is a bit of a long process to get that approval, but also you're looking at between $20,000 to $25,000 for 2 dosing sessions, and I mean
Wow.
that includes, your psychologist, your psychotherapist, your psychiatrist, and integration sessions afterwards and stuff. But I don't know anyone that can drop 20 grand on therapy right now,
That's a
let
lot of
alone
money.
those who are, arguably the most vulnerable and the people who need this the most definitely don't have $25,000 to go sit in 2 sessions. It's also about the lack of psychiatrists that will eventually be working with the medicines in general anyway. I
Mhm.
mean, there's not a whole lot that, I mean, as of, I think it was like last month, I think there was 6 or 8 applications to the TGA to be working with the medicine. And I mean, that's great. But when you think about how many people would like to access this therapy, with 6 to 8 psychiatrists in the country doing it, at $25,000, it makes it challenging. It's very challenging, and the accessibility issues is just such an important one. I mean, we're focusing on getting guys overseas to Peru and healing in the traditional shamanic setting, where my co-founder Michael, he has a similar story to I, where he has, gone through the PTSD journey, ended up in Ecuador and Peru healing with ayahuasca, and it's the way that we've healed. It's the way that we've done a lot of work, and we aren't focusing on the clinical model so much here.
Yeah.
We're not going to be focusing on that as much. It's more about supporting the indigenous traditional medicine keepers and allowing them to do the work
To
that they've
keep
been
doing the
doing.
work.
Yeah, for thousands of years they've been doing this for.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I,
And
I
also, like they, to get somebody over there, does it cost $25,000? Like,
hell
I know
no,
that's what.
hell no.
I just like to put something else into perspective here. Like, I was talking to somebody in the UK, and because the UK, health system, it's so broken, like in any other Western countries. The whole public system, if you have any sort of like mental health issue, you're gonna have to wait for like 2 years to see anybody. So to see a psychiatrist in London, it's costing you like £1,000
Wow,
so when
wow.
you look at that, so that's okay. So that's 20 sessions. Let's say, it's a bit less than that, because the pound is more what it is,
Sure.
but I mean, so it is crazy, right? To think that and people are desperately paying that because their child needs, they're teenager, they're 20, and people are paying, they're just like doing whatever it takes, right?
Yeah.
Why does it cost? Is the cost for the psychiatrist, the psychologist, or is the cost for the medicine that why does it cost so much?
It's a combination of those things. The medicines, the MDMA and the psilocybin. My understanding is that we are importing that from a Canadian pharmaceutical company.
Uh-huh.
This is all synthetic, by the way. We're using synthetic psilocybin, and that's one thing that sits a bit off with us,
Yes.
here at Heroic Hearts Project. But I mean, it appears to be doing the same thing. It appears to be assisting people in the way that it should be. So that's fantastic. Yeah. So I mean, your dosing session would go from 6 to 8 hours.
Oh yeah.
So you're paying for, and I mean, the psychiatrist doesn't need to be involved for those 6 to 8 hours. You'll have a psychotherapist and a psychologist. So psychotherapist and a psychologist fee per hour, say what, 180 for a psychologist. I'm
Yeah.
not sure exactly
Well,
for a
it could be a lot more than that if
psychiatrist.
they're good. Yeah.
And then sitting there with you for 8 hours, and then obviously I'm not sure what the model is. Every psychiatrist has to put a protocol forward to a human ethics committee to be approved. So every person, it seems, is going to be doing it slightly differently. So the amount of integration sessions, I'm not exactly sure on,
Afterwards,
but
yeah.
having to pay for that as well. The medicine itself. I mean, New South Wales and South Australia recently put out that they would only be approving people to be accessing these medicines as an in-state patient option. So
Oh
that
yeah.
then drives the price up even more for
Oh
people
yeah,
in New
because they
South
have to.
Wales and South Australia. You're paying for private hospital costs and as well on
Yeah.
top of that. So, I mean, $20,000 is really the baseline I think we're looking
Yeah,
at
yeah.
here. New South Wales, South Australia, potentially more. But, I mean, it was always going to start somewhere pretty high, I think.
Yeah.
It's a new medicine. new medicine in terms of
Yeah.
Western world. It's a new. There's a lot of protections around. It's very controlled. You know, we kind of had to expect this. It's sort of the same thing with when ketamine came onto the scene for PTSD. Ketamine, still to this day, is extremely expensive to access. And it requires an ongoing treatment, though, with ketamine, which is, I guess, why it is so expensive. But, I mean, we knew it was going to start high. We didn't expect it to be 20 grand.
Yeah.
No one, I don't think anyone really expected that number to be thrown out initially. And it was extremely disheartening to hear that number thrown out. I mean, we advocated for years leading up to the rescheduling, speaking in Parliament, speaking to ministers, sharing our stories publicly, speaking to the media, you know, doing all we can. And the rescheduling is great. It's a great step. It's a great first step. But, I mean, we have a long way to go to iron out the kinks to make this an accessible treatment for people in Australia and around the world. I mean, at the moment, it is significantly cheaper to travel to Peru, to sit with, you know, in the jungle and heal in that way. And there is a lot to be said about healing in a natural setting, not in a clinical space.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I can just I watched that Netflix documentary and I saw exactly, you know, like they show like a session. I don't know if you've watched that, like, you know, somebody, you know, in the room and they had two, you know, psychologists, and, you know, like it was the whole night or the whole time, you know, because you could see the lights on and off. And yeah, I mean, it is like you're in a box, aren't you? Like it's kind of like if you are out like in nature, or, you know, it's complete. I can imagine it feels completely different.
Yeah. And I mean, especially in the jungle, the indigenous Shipibo people, the medicine keepers with ayahuasca in the Pucallpa region, they believe so much of the healing powers of the jungle, the healing powers of the waterways, of the rivers, of the medicines that you'll take there that are non-psychedelic plant medicines that you'll take there. They, you know, their pharmacy is the jungle. Their pharmacy is plants. And it's really quite amazing I mean, coming from the Western world, to see just the use of plants and their connection, their spirit connection to plants. It's it's a completely different world.
Yeah. And so the objective here is there anybody, like, for example, you mentioned that, you know, there is you know, the same kind of branch in the UK and the US. Are there any states in the US that are doing this well yet? Are there anywhere in the world, like in the first world, that are they're kind of like, you know, really a little bit more advanced than in Australia now?
So in terms of it being a therapeutic benefit, like of therapeutic benefit, Australia is leading the space there.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I know. There's been counties and there's been states in America that have decriminalized plant medicines. So of course you can access them without fear of prosecution, but not in a therapeutic way. So they're not far behind, though. It's prompted that the FDA will be definitely rescheduling MDMA in 2024. That's the prediction there. I'm not sure where they're going to sit with psilocybin yet, but the research with MDMA for PTSD it's
Incredible.
undeniable. It's unbelievable. It is crazy. I'm still blown away by the latest phase 3 trial from MAPS coming out with, was it 104 people participated in the trial, 53 were given MDMA, and at the end of that, 71.2% no longer fit the criteria for PTSD diagnosis.
Wow.
71%. And this is people who've been deemed to have been suffering from moderate to severe trauma for 16 years on average. That's a long time to be battling.
There is no drug in the market that provides these results. I mean, I don't know much about it, but I know that much.
Yeah, absolute breakthrough therapies for sure. Like you just can't deny that. And I mean, America, so they'll most likely be rescheduling MDMA definitely by 2024. We don't see that being far behind. Who knows how long it's going to take for psilocybin to get a bit better of a name over there, but I mean, people are sort of looking to us at the moment now for how it's going to unfold here. So, I mean, we've got some American researchers coming over in December who just want to see how it's all coming, how it's all unfolding, how it's all, you know, and it's interesting because no one's been approved yet. No one's actually been through the therapy yet. So who knows what they're going to learn from us yet, but maybe take some lessons of even potentially what not to do. Maybe, I'm not saying we're doing it wrong, but the $20,000 to $25,000 dosing sessions is that is wrong. that's
Yeah.
not right. That's something that needs to be worked on, whether it's Medicare getting involved to subsidize, or
Yeah.
private health insurance potentially. I mean, that's definitely a long way away. DVA stepping in to cover veterans, work cover to cover police. It's
Yeah.
we're still quite away from that. Yeah, there was a prediction put out a while ago that it would take at least 10 years before Medicare would step in and
Wow.
subsidize some of these medicines. So yeah,
Yeah.
we're in a tricky space, but I mean, it's great. I mean, I'm really proud that we've been the first on a federal level as a whole of a country to reschedule these. It's something that we can feel proud about, despite the challenges and the accessibility issues. It's something that we can still feel proud about, that we've made
Yeah.
that decision. And our TGA has been historically very conservative. So to
Yes.
know that it should be a really big encouraging factor for countries around the world, if they do know that our TGA is rather conservative, to see
Mm.
them reschedule should give faith to other countries and other people that it is around the corner. It is coming, where these are going to be far more accepted into mainstream medicine.
Yeah. I feel that because we have such a huge problem, we and every other Western country, with mental health, I think, it's costing the government also like a lot of money, right? Let's face it,
Billions.
people are, getting out of work and they can't come back to work anymore. And
Yeah.
it's not that they don't want to. A lot of people want to, but they just are not able to, right?
Mm.
So, if people get treated with something that it's efficient, they can get back to work and get back into a normal life. I mean, it's not hard to think like that, but of course, it is the whole, the bureaucracy that goes around, and that is just incredible. But I think governments are getting desperate because every national
Yeah.
security is bankrupt. Let's face it, like, you know,
We're not in a good place.
so they need to do something, and they need to do something quick. I'm curious to know, what do they people who live in the jungle, and I suppose you mentioned the tribe. Now, what do they think about the synthetic medicine, and what the Western world is trying to do?
Yeah. I mean, they're seeing it in, I mean, I can only speak for a few people, but
Yeah,
they're definitely seeing it as there is some pros and there's some big cons.
yeah,
I mean, when you take, it would be a whole different story if you were to start putting ayahuasca in a clinical setting.
yeah,
I personally feel that I can't think of anything more wrong than doing that. It's it's a very sacred medicine that's being used purely by the indigenous people in South America in the jungle. So I know that psilocybin too traditionally in Mexico was used in the indigenous cultures. So I'm sure they have some different feelings about this too. But using synthetic, when there is such a strong belief in the maestros space, that when you're sitting with plant medicines, you're connecting and you're creating
the
a
energy.
relationship with a plant
Yeah,
spirit.
yeah,
So, and that plant spirit will guide you then for the rest of your time if you allow it to. You form a relationship with Mother Ayahuasca. She's referred to as a her, and she is a beautiful teacher, and I feel very blessed that I've been able to stay connected with her since sitting there. But to think that we're creating synthetic medicines to go into this space, and I mean, this is half the battle with the clinical model, is the research, the data collection, all of this. They are not taking into account the mystical experience, the
yeah. They don't believe in
unexplainable.
that, right? There is no money for them, so drug companies are not interested in that. And
It's very hard to as well collect data on that too. Like, how do we collect data on that? How do we then ask questions that are going to enable us to collect the correct data on that? Like,
yeah,
I've got no idea how you would be measuring mystical experience in positives or negatives, or like whatever it might be. I don't know the answer to that. And I mean, it's a struggle for some pharmaceutical companies now who are running trials where they know that they need a placebo control group, but if someone's going into a psychedelic clinical
yeah.
trial and they get given a pill and there is no experience at all, then obviously they know they're in the placebo group. So I mean, there is struggles around with this already, around do we give them a low dose of a different drug? Do we give them Ritalin? I know Ritalin's been used as the
As a
placebo control
placebo.
group, yeah, a few times. Very low doses of the medicine they're giving in higher doses to the other group. But I mean, there's a lot of struggles with trials like this, because from the Indigenous people's perspective, you can't just collect data on that. You can't
No.
you can't collect data without including the mystical experience, without including the deep relationship you develop with the plant spirit and the plant medicine itself. It's yeah, there's a lot of conflicting ideas around that are really, it's going to take some deep thought and a lot of impressive work alongside the Indigenous people to really understand that better. And I mean, I can't think of anyone better than engaging the traditional medicine keepers, the Indigenous people who have been working with these medicines. They're not
Yeah.
being engaged enough in these processes, and they need to be.
Yeah. Do they want to be? Do you think?
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Okay.
For sure. There is a lot of call from Indigenous elders and around the world in different settings of, you're suddenly using our medicines. Like,
Yeah.
it's dangerous to be using these without understanding
Well,
the energy that's going to get exchanged between therapist or maestro and participant. It's there's a lot to this that, I mean, and it's kind of sucks because I know we kind of know, in the Western world, we've never looked at trials or medications in that way. And I don't see it happening anytime soon. As much as we would love for that to happen and a bit more of it incorporated from the Indigenous side of things, we care about numbers, science, stats, data, that's the sort of stuff we care
yeah.
about. And when you can't really measure a mystical experience and how that's affected you, it makes it really hard. So yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
think that's when people need to empower themselves. Like when I came out of my own experience and I was able to finish 12 sessions of chemo feeling stronger than I started,
wow.
like physically, mentally, emotionally, and I kept going on this journey, for me, I was like, okay, well, there is another way. Like people, yes, I did turn up to chemo every 2 weeks, but that wasn't the answer, right? Like I knew I needed to do something else. And I looked into studying either maybe nutrition because I changed my diet, or maybe exercise physiologist, or maybe a PT, or maybe a dietitian, or even becoming a doctor. But I found myself thinking, like, I just can't say that I did only one thing, right? I can't, it wasn't only physical, it was mentally, it was emotional, and it was spiritual. And and this connection that you were talking about here, the energy, I can talk about the energy that I for me, I believe in God, but the connection with everything that I did, like when I looked at the food thinking, this food is healing me.
Mm,
Like like people think like, oh my God, it's so hard to change a diet. Well, I don't want to eat McDonald's because that food is killing me.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's that kind of thing. Like, so when you look at that plate and you think like, this food is healing me, the energy exchange is different, right?
Yeah.
Because that food is healing you, right? And I decided to study a bachelor of holistic health science, and I'm studying a PhD in natural medicine, which is all about quantum physics,
Wow.
which talks about a lot about the energy. And and you're talking about how do you measure, how do you do research. And I mean, there is people in the world doing that. Dr. Joe Dispenza is one of them, like putting like putting kind of like little wires in people's heads when they're doing the meditation, so he can measure, because he comes from a science background, and he knows that the doctor's only going to believe if they see the data. And he can show in his events that people are changing their energy just using the chemicals in their body in 4 days.
Wow.
So in the ayahuasca, it could be something like that. But the problem is, of course, drug companies are not going to finance that because there's no money to be made for them, unless there is money to be made for them. So we kind of get into that space that I think people really need to take charge of their own healing, and just make the decisions for themselves. Because, if I was to wait for the doctors to tell me to change my lifestyle,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying that it's their fault. They did the best they could. I'm
Yeah.
very grateful that I was in Australia, that I was, My surgeon was the best, my oncologists were great, the nurses were incredible. But do you know what I mean? Like, the
Yeah.
truth is, like, that bed was mine to do. And this is why I went on my own journey. And energy, it was a big part of it.
Yeah.
This exchange that you're talking about. Like, for me, like, I make sure that I spend time in nature. I make sure that I ground myself. And when you talk about this, the exchange about the healer, and the healer, like in the ceremonies, I don't know if you've listened to this, but Dr. Gabo Mate talks about a ceremony that he went to, and it was his retreat, right?
Yeah.
And then they were about to receive the ayahuasca medicine, right? And the shaman said to him, like, hello, come here, you need to step aside. And he said, what? And he said, you can't receive the medicine because your energy is too charged negatively. And the shamans got really upset because everybody was health professionals there, and they were like, what are you guys doing? Like, you're collecting all this energy from everybody, which is exactly the work that you're doing about, the first responders, and the work that you did, like when you're purging, that is not for you to be holding on to.
Yeah.
And now after COVID, more than ever, there is doctors and nurses. I mean, in Australia, we probably didn't suffer as much as in the UK and America, but like, these people are left broken.
Yeah, COVID was a big thing. And I mean, that COVID is part of the problem why it takes someone 6 to 12 months to access a psychiatrist now. It's I know that it's never been harder for people to access any sort of help since post-COVID world. And yeah, I mean, that's got to change. It's just crazy. But yeah, back to the energy exchange thing. I mean, this is why it's so important as well for whoever's taking you through a ceremony with a plant medicine to be experienced, to not be sitting with someone who drank ayahuasca 3 times and now feels like they're a healer, like, and there is a lot of that going on, which is absolutely
I can just imagine.
It's really scary. People go to one ayahuasca retreat and they're like, I'm going to become a maestro. And it's like, well, okay, if that's your calling, cool, but you're going to go through years of training, and if that's what you want, then amazing. But you don't just become a healer after you've done some healing. It's being able to manage the dark energies that are coming out of people during ceremony, not taking them on, being able to redirect them, being able to hold space, being able to. There is so much that comes into holding space. I am not even going to pretend to understand the ins and outs of it because I am not aware of just how deep it is. But I know it is so much more than people think it is. Holding space for people who are going through deep traumas from their childhood sometimes, and they've lived with them for so long. When you're holding space for 10 people going through that, you better hope you've got a good guide or a good facilitator or a good maestro.
Yeah, I totally agree. So what do you want to leave the audience with here? Like, what do you want people to reach out? Like, what it is the thing that you're passionate about, that you want to really leave everyone that is watching this, maybe a little maybe a homework or something they can do or something.
Well, I'll always say to people that if you've resonated at all with my story in any way, just please speak to just one person about psychedelic-assisted therapy. Yes. And I mean, if you really want to challenge yourself, pick someone that will be resistant to that conversation. There is too much data. There is too much evidence. We're in a space where it's undeniable that these have a place in medicine. Yet there is still a lot of stigma around it. There is still a lot of holding on to the narrative that the war on drugs fed us. And I mean, it's understandable. I understand why people are still very hesitant to jump on board with this. But I mean, especially if you speak to someone who's had a significant healing journey with plant medicines or psychedelics in general, that you generally, a lot of people, some of the most conservative people I know, when I've spoken to them about it, have keenly been interested to hear more. And I mean, a lot of people too will just roll their eyes at me and walk away.
And they're not the right people for you to talk to. Like
exactly.
I said, like, make sure that you talk to the right person, right? Like, the person needs to be open for that conversation, right? And I think it's spot on there. Like, don't try to change people's minds about it. If they're open, that's great.
But especially as well, if you've got a friend or a partner, anyone that's been struggling, that is now considering psychedelic medicines, please be supportive of that. please be supportive of the idea. Put aside your fears, your ideas of what you think you know about
Yeah.
psychedelics. Just put them aside for a minute and just truly be supportive for your friend or partner. It might not be the path that you go down yourself, but it's not for you to go down yourself if it's your partner or your friend. I've got a few people I know whose friends or partners have not been exactly supportive of the idea, and it takes so much courage for some of these people to decide that they want to sit
Yeah.
with these medicines. It takes a lot of research, a lot of thinking, a lot of up and downing, the cons, the pros, whatever it is. It takes a lot to go through that, and to then vocalize that to someone that you trust. Please just hold space for them. Please just be there and listen to them. Don't shit down the idea immediately because of your preconceived ideas of things.
Yeah.
I think creating a supportive space where people who are struggling can feel open about speaking about just wanting to access these. There's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, please just be supportive of people who come to you. And I mean, if you do have a lot of preconceived ideas around it, that just maybe accept that you might not understand everything anymore. Things have changed. There's a lot of
Yeah.
research, there's a lot of data, there's a lot supporting this. And I just think it's one of the worst things when someone gets shamed for speaking about this or speaking about wanting to access it, particularly people who are struggling. When they get shamed speaking out about things that they want to try to help get themselves better, there's nothing worse that someone can do than to just poo-poo the idea and shit on it.
Yeah.
It really can make someone choose to not want to open up at all anymore, and can delve further into the depression and suicidal ideation. So
Yeah.
just, yeah, have an open
Is
mind.
it a good idea to speak to your health professional? Like, as in, if like, if more people spoke about it, is there a way that I can access this? Because I know that, for example, in the cancer world, a lot of people were asking for the marijuana, like the gummies for the pain, especially when I went to a conference here in Brisbane, and they were talking about that, and they were having real troubles with the production of it because they couldn't get the actual product. And they said, the demand is coming from the sons and daughters of the parents that are, maybe late stage cancer. They're in so much pain, and they're asking us, like, can we give them something that it's natural as opposed to morphine or whatever. And it's almost like the people created a demand, right? And the government is like, and I know that now they're in a much better space for it, because there is more available now. They can produce more, but or do you think, is it a dangerous thing for people to ask, like their psychologists, psychiatrists, or doctors?
I don't think it's dangerous. I think the answer you'll get will really show you how much your health professional is keeping up to date with the new and emerging
Yeah.
treatments. When I had an elderly friend of mine recently tell me that her GP has recommended medicinal cannabis, and I just felt so happy that she
Yeah.
has a doctor that is willing to keep up with the research, has an open mind about these new therapies, and is willing to speak to even an 80, 90-year-old about
Yes.
it. I think it really reflects a lot on your health professional. And I mean, I would never feel scared going to talk to my doctor about it, but don't expect that they're going to be on board. Don't expect that they're going to have any idea about it. Don't expect that they won't be still following that narrative of the war on drugs, that everything is bad, psychedelics will kill you, you're going to jump off a bridge because you think you can fly, that whole thing. It's just don't be surprised if that's the case. But I mean, I definitely encourage people to go and speak to their health professionals purely to create more awareness about
Yes.
it, to destigmatize it more, to help just even put that seed in their brain of psychedelic, it's been approved here, you should go look at that. It's your job to go look at that, to know if it's something that might help me or not.
Yeah.
But I mean, there is still a lot of resistance. There's divide even in the psychiatric community around it. The rescheduling itself was a bit controversial in terms of how it came about, and it really divided the medical community as well. So there are still a lot of people sitting on the side of, we've rescheduled too early, there wasn't enough data here, this is gonna be bad. There is still a lot of that going on. So it really depends who your psychiatrist is, who your psychologist is. But no, I'd say go ask about it. Go plant the seed if you can.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, are you happy for me to add your details below so people can reach out? Do they have any questions, or do they have anything they want to know more about, your project as well?
Please, yes, please. Anyone listening that wants to chat about plant medicines, ayahuasca, psychedelic therapy, anything, please get in contact. We love chatting about this with people. And I mean, even if you just want a recommendation for a good retreat in Peru, we're happy to give that too. But yeah, please connect in. The more people we speak with, the more awareness we get, the more awareness we share, and the more community we build too, which is really important to us.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Holly. I really, really, really appreciate it. It was a very informative conversation for me. I feel less scared now.
Yeah, great. Yes.
I'm not saying that I'm gonna go to Peru yet, but I might need another conversation with you for that. But
Yeah, let me know when you do.
but yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I really like the energy that you brought into this conversation to make it easy, and from a place where you were at, it's amazing to see. I mean, you can see that although you said I'm not healed, you can see there is a lot of healing that you have gone through.
Come a long way, yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for having me and connecting in. It's been really lovely chatting.
Yes, take care.
Yeah.